All right, continuing with conference weeks here on YouTube, and this week, of course, is ACC week, so another ACC video coming up right now. Yesterday, we kicked it off with a video, can anybody in the ACC catch Clemson? I'll put a link to that video right up here in case any of you guys haven't seen that one yet and you want to check it out. Today, we're going to rank the head coaches within the ACC. Let's go. Good morning, it's Uncle Lou here. Yeah, that's right, it's me, Uncle Lou, and I'm live for you on YouTube today, so thanks for watching. I really appreciate it also. And in addition to that as well, subscribe to the channel if you're not already. I post college football videos almost every single day of the year, and some of them are halfway watchable. I don't know about this one. You'll have to let me know down in the comments after you watch it how I did on this one. Give this video a thumbs up if you don't mind. It doesn't take you any time, doesn't cost you any money, and it really helps me out a lot, so go ahead and hit that thumbs up button now. What we're going to do today is we're going to run through the ACC coaches, and I'm going to rank them in order from worst to first. Let's do it. Now, the way I've decided to do this is I've decided for the ACC coaches to sort of split this list into two separate lists. We have 4 new coaches in the ACC this year, and I didn't really think it was fair to try to rank those 4 new coaches within the rest of the conference. I mean, I guess I could have compared what Jeff Collins did at Temple to what Pat Narduzzi has done at Pitt over the last several years, but I just decided to sort of separate into 2 lists. So basically, we'll have a top 10 list of coaches in the ACC, returning coaches, coaches who aren't new. And then up first, I'm going to rank sort of how I think the new coaches might do at their new schools. All right, the 4 new coaches, of course, you got Jeff Collins at Georgia Tech, right? You got Manny Diaz at Miami, Mack Brown at North Carolina, and Scott Satterfield at Louisville. Hard to rank new coaches in a conference, I think, right? It's not always apples to apples in terms of what a coach might have done the previous year at a smaller classification school in a weaker conference. In the case of Mack Brown, the guy hasn't coached in several years after leaving or getting fired, depending on who you believe, from Texas several years back. He's been holed up in a studio doing analysis and commentary and this kind of thing the last few years. So it makes it hard to sort of project how these coaches might do at their new school. A lot of times, I looked at this list of 4 names for a while, and I kept ranking them, and basically it was based off of the school they're going to. I don't really know what else you had to rank it off of. So what I've decided to do is sort of how I think these coaches will do this year at their new school. So that's sort of the criteria I used in ranking these 4 new coaches. There's lots of other ways to rank them, I'm sure. That's the way I decided to do it here. Who's likely to be the most successful year 1 at their new school? We'll start with the who I think will be the least successful, and I'm going to go with Scott Satterfield. It's nothing really against Scott Satterfield in general. He did a pretty good job at App State the last few years he was there. No major upsets. Everyone likes to, every time App State plays somebody every single year, I get a bunch of comments here on the channel about how, such and such a team better watch out for App State. They're giant killers. App State beat Michigan in 2007. They haven't beat a Power 5 team since then. That includes the time that they had Scott Satterfield. But he did a good job at App State with what he had there. But I don't necessarily think you can take what he did at App State and project that to Louisville. Louisville is an abject disaster right now. They're a mess. And let's be real, no matter who the coach is at Louisville, there's likely not going to be another Lamar Jackson walk through that door at Louisville. I think of these 4 new coaches, Scott Satterfield at Louisville is likely to have the roughest first year. All right, third on the list of new coaches in the ACC, I have Jeff Collins at Georgia Tech. Again, it's not really anything personally against Jeff Collins. It's not that I think Jeff Collins is a bad coach or can't be successful at some point down the road at Georgia Tech, but the reality of the situation that he walked into in Atlanta at Georgia Tech is not a very good one. Paul Johnson is gone. He's been there for a long time, and of course he ran that triple option offense. To run that offense, you need a specific type of player. That's not the offense Jeff Collins wants to run. Now, a lot of people are interested in watching Georgia Tech this year to see what type of offense they try to put on the field. Is it going to be some sort of a hybrid offense between what Georgia Tech ran under Paul Johnson and what they want to run eventually under Jeff Collins? I mean, you have to have, if you want to run any type of modern day pro style offense, you got to have a quarterback that can throw the ball. That wasn't high on the recruiting list at Georgia Tech under Paul Johnson. They had a lot of teeny, small, but fast, undersized quarterbacks who had been running the triple option in high school and middle school and pee-wee football going back to the time they were 8 years old and continued on up through Georgia Tech. It's hard to take any of those players, whether it's a quarterback, running back, wide receivers. I mean, they recruited blocking wide receivers, right? Even the offensive linemen, it's a certain type of offensive line you want really to run the triple option. So it's hard to take pieces that were acquired to run the triple option offense and just flip a switch in one offseason and sort of teach them how to run a totally different style of offense, a modern day, pro style type of offense, any other type of offense, really. So I just think that's a recipe for hard times at Georgia Tech for the next couple of years. I do think Jeff Collins will elevate the recruiting at Georgia Tech. There were certain players that Georgia Tech just never had a chance to get because of the style of offense they were running. Now they can at least go after those players. Will they get them all? No. Will they get one or two of them a year? Probably so. And we saw that already with the 2019 recruiting class, a big jump forward from what they were used to having under Paul Johnson. And we'll see how they carry that forward into 2020 under Jeff Collins. But I've got Jeff Collins and Georgia Tech coming in third at the list of new coaches in the ACC. All right, and second I have Mack Brown. And now this list wasn't easy to do, trying to figure how these coaches are going to do year one, because North Carolina was an absolute failure last year. They finished with, 2 wins? Them and Louisville were just absolutely horrible. Georgia Tech was a much better team last year than both of those teams. It's just the offensive transition there has me worried. Mack Brown does have a lot of experience. He's got a lot of big game experience. Of course, he won a national title back in, 2005, 6, 7, something like that with Vince Young at Texas. But like I mentioned, he's been in the broadcast booth for a while. He's older. Of course, he had a stint at North Carolina previously, so this is sort of like a homecoming for him. I kind of get the impression with North Carolina that this is really just sort of a placeholder job, I think, in my mind. North Carolina was so bad last year, they didn't have much of a chance of going out and landing any big name, like hot young coach or anything like that. It was going to be hard to find somebody noteworthy to take that job. I almost feel like Mack Brown accepted this job almost not out of pity, but sort of like a returning the favor type thing to North Carolina. And I feel like Mack Brown and North Carolina both have the same goal, which is just, I don't think anybody at North Carolina expects them to compete for an ACC title under Mack Brown anytime ever, really. I think the goal for Mack Brown at North Carolina is to get them back to respectability, 7, 8 wins, something like that, and then 3 or 4 years down the road, maybe then go out and make like a splashy hire with one of these new young guys, a hot offensive mind or something like that. But this seems like sort of just a placeholder for now. A lot of room for improvement coming off a 2-win season, though. So I have Mack Brown in North Carolina at number 2. All right, and of course that leaves Manny Diaz at Miami. Now, Manny Diaz, the only coach on this list with 0 head coaching experience, and I do think that matters in college football. Yeah, you get the occasional thing that happens like at Oklahoma where Lincoln Riley steps in for Bob Stoops. Lincoln Riley, of course, having no head coaching experience, steps right in. Oklahoma continues winning 10, 11, 12 games a year and losing the first round of the playoffs per usual without any step backs, sort of no real learning curve or anything that you could look at for Lincoln Riley. But the majority of the time when a coach gets a job for the first time, he's going to have some bumps in the road, some coaching mistakes. You see a lot of clock management issues a lot of times with new head coaches, just different things. Manny Diaz is an elite defensive mind. It's a totally different job running a team as a head coach than it is as a defensive coordinator. With that being said, he's definitely stepping into the best position of any of these 4 coaches in terms of the new hires in the ACC for 2019. Miami has a talented team, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Offensively, it's been frustrating if you're a Miami fan to watch their offense over the last couple of years. Mark Richt, supposedly an offensive guy. I don't want to get into, what all might have went wrong there with the nepotism and him hiring his son and different things like that. But the point is, the offense just wasn't where it needed to be. Mark Richt quits, retires, gets fired, however you want to word it. They bring Manny Diaz in. Of course, Manny Diaz from Miami. His dad was a former mayor down there, so well-known name. They love this guy, Manny Diaz, there. I have high expectations for Miami in 2019. Their schedule is very favorable. There's really no reason why they can't win the division. So in terms of the new coaches in the ACC for 2019, I had to rank Manny Diaz number one, as I feel like he has the best opportunity year one for a pretty good year. All right, so now I'm going to rank the coaches that, the existing coaches within the ACC, right? Guys that have been there, maybe they've only been there a year, but they've been there, okay? So that leaves 10. There's 4 new coaches. There's 14 teams in the ACC, 4 new coaches, 10 returning coaches. So what we're going to do now, we're going to rank these returning coaches from worst to first. Number 10, Willie Taggart. I'm sorry, Florida State fans, this guy has been an abject failure from the time he stepped foot in Tallahassee. Why he was even hired to start with is a bit of a head scratcher. It's not like he had a string of 10-win seasons somewhere and a bunch of people wanted him and you brought him in. I mean, let's look at this guy's win totals. Now, this is over the course of about 10 years or whatever at 4 different teams if you include Florida State, okay? So going back to his first year as a head coach, 2 wins, 7 wins, 7 wins. All right, then he changes teams to South Florida. 2 wins, 4 wins, 8 wins, 10 wins. So a steady improvement at South Florida over a 4-year period from 2 wins to 10 wins, but 1 10-win season, and then Oregon hires him, right? He goes to Oregon. Oregon was a good team. Oregon was winning 9, 10 games, 11 games sometimes a year. They bring in Willie Taggart. They go 7-5 year one under Willie Taggart. Florida State then hires him. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He had coached 8 seasons as a head coach before Florida State hired him. And in those 8 seasons, he had 1 10-win season and 1 8-win season. And then a bunch of 7-win seasons, a 2-win season, another 2-win season, a 4-win. So it's not like he had a proven track record here. You bring him into Florida State, supposedly he's an elite recruiter and he's got ties to Florida, and that's great. You don't really need that if you're the head coach of Florida State. Now, if you're the head coach at South Carolina or Tennessee or Georgia even or Missouri or North Carolina, whatever, and you're looking to hire a coach that has ties to Florida because Florida's a recruiting hotbed, okay, that makes sense because you're out of state to start with. So you bring in somebody who's able to go down into Florida and is familiar with the high schools and the high school coaches and the camps down there and things like that. Okay, that makes sense. But for the head coach of Florida State, you're already in Florida. Florida State should sell itself. You shouldn't have to hire a coach based solely off of his recruiting ability at Florida State. It makes no sense at all, none. And on top of that, he shows up and the recruiting is disappointing. Did I write it down? I hope I wrote it down. I think I did. 2019, 19th ranked recruiting class. Now, is that terrible? No. But again, you're in the state of Florida. How are you 19th in recruiting? That's just not good for Florida State. It's just not. The year before that, 2018, now he was hired at the last minute. So you guys know the story. Jimbo Fisher was there. So in 2018, he had the 11th ranked class, but most of that class was built by Jimbo Fisher. And then Fisher leaves in November, end of November, whatever it was, beginning of December, takes the job at Texas A&M. In comes Willie Taggart to just sort of wrap up that recruiting class at 11. But his first full year, his first full cycle of recruiting, he drops down to 19th. I think for the 2020 class, he's currently sitting somewhere in the top 15, maybe around 11 or 12 or something. I don't expect that to hold, though. I think he'll drop some. Some other teams will pass him, I think. So it's just been another disappointment. And then what did he do on the field? He goes out and misses a bowl game for the first time at Florida State in 37 years. No offense. Florida State's offense, listen, it's hard to even watch a Florida State football game. That's how bad that offense is. The quarterback situation is an absolute mess. Willie Taggart didn't sign a single quarterback in either of his first 2 classes. He brings in a transfer from Wisconsin, Alex Hornibrook. This guy's a game manager. He's been handing the ball off to elite running backs behind NFL offensive lines for 3 years. You bring him in as a graduate transfer, but now you say you're not even going to play him. You're going to go with this 180-pound Blackman, whatever this guy's name is, he looks like any Sally Struthers commercial you've ever seen, with these skinny homeless people with flies on their eyeballs, and for the price of a cup of coffee you can save his life. I mean, the guy just doesn't look like a Division I quarterback. It's just a mess down there. You only had 1,000 yards rushing as a team last year. I could go on and on. Listen, Willie Taggart's the worst coach in the ACC in my opinion. You know how bad you have to be to get 5 wins at Florida State? You have to be pretty bad. If he doesn't have a massive turnaround this year, and I'm talking 8, 9, 10 wins at least, you got to get rid of this guy. You can't. Florida State's not the type of school that should have to give a guy 3, 4, 5 years struggling of bowl eligibility to quote unquote turn it around. There was nothing to turn around to start with. Anyway, I could go on for probably an hour about Jim Blackwayne, Willie Taggart, but anyway, I digress. He's 10. All right, that takes us to number 9, and this one hurts my feelings. I'm going to have to admit I was wrong on this one. Justin Fuentes, well, whatever his name is, I don't know. I don't speak Mexican. I was so wrong on this guy, Justin Fuente, Virginia Tech. I was high on this guy coming out of Memphis. In fact, when Georgia got rid of Mark Richt, all signs were pointing to Kirby Smart. But you know, you always say, well, if that doesn't work out, who are another 1 or 2 we might want to look at? Justin Fuente was a guy that was high on my list. Thank God we dodged that bullet. This guy's been a disaster at Virginia Tech. So I'm just going to have to admit I was wrong on this one. Losing season last year, 6-7. He's been there 4 years. We talked about how at least Willie Taggart, when he was at South Florida, went from like 2 wins to 4 wins to 8 wins to 10 wins. So at least you can see some improvement. Look at this for Justin Fuente at Georgia Tech. Year 1, 10 wins. Great. You're thinking you got what you paid for. Year 2, 9 wins. Year 3, 6 wins. Year 4, 6 wins. Actually, I think it's 3 years only, 10, 9, and 6. But anyways, so the trajectory going down there. Of course, everyone remembers getting beaten by Old Dominion. And I mean, it's not good in Blacksburg. And the bad part is the ACC, I think, needs Virginia Tech to be a pretty good team. Let's be real. The ACC has been terrible the last couple of years outside of Clemson, really. With Florida State and Miami being down over the last few years, it would have been a prime time for a team like Virginia Tech to take a step forward to try to be that team that could challenge Clemson. They've completely blown that opportunity. Miami and Florida State won't be down forever, and Virginia Tech's done nothing to try to step in to fill that void left when those two teams fell off. Virginia Tech, Justin Fuente, number 9. All right, and here, I'm going to be honest here. From about 8-3, almost 8-2, you could almost throw a dart and pick any of these coaches. None of these coaches are terrible. None stand out really as being elite. You know, when we start looking at these coaches, you're going to see a whole lot of 7, 8 win seasons with the occasional 9 and 10 win season. But for number 8, I've got Steve Adazio, Boston College. The definition of treading water and mediocrity here. 7 wins. Not sure what happened here with 3 wins. But then the last 3 years, 7. So he's been there 6 years. 5 of the 6 years, he's won 7 games. The one off year where he only won 3. I guess Boston College is the type of team that's happy just making a bowl game every single year, because that's literally all Adazio has done at Boston College. But I've got him at number 8 on this list. Number 7, Pat Narduzzi at Pittsburgh. And this is a good example of what I meant about throwing a dart. If you want to make a list and put Pat Narduzzi at 3 or 4, it's hard for me to argue against that. But I've got him at 7 here. He's, of course, at Pittsburgh, overachieves almost every single year. You're not going to find Pittsburgh anywhere in the top 20 in recruiting. Unless you're a Pittsburgh fan, you probably can't name 5 players from Pittsburgh. Not that are on the team now. You probably can't name 5 players from Pittsburgh over the entire time that this guy has been there, Pat Narduzzi. You probably can't name 5 players on Pittsburgh over the last 10 years. And that's sort of my point. You almost forget they even exist here. But he does seem to do a pretty good job with what he's able to get recruiting-wise at Pitt. But again, nothing jumps out at you here to say, oh, wow, why isn't someone coming in to hire this guy to a better school? It's just sort of floating along there. All right, number 6 on this list, I've got Bronco Mendenhall. Now, this is one coach I think in the ACC to keep an eye on. I think this guy's got some potential. I'm not going to get into my feelings about BYU here, but he comes from BYU to Virginia. It was a really strange hire when it happened. A lot of people were scratching their head going, you know, this is unusual, what's going on here. But what does he do? Well, 2 wins, 6 wins, 8 wins. So heading in the right direction here. right? The 3 years before he got there, Virginia couldn't even make a bowl game. Honestly, they were one of the worst teams in the ACC and really one of the worst teams in the Power 5. 28-0 victory over South Carolina in the bowl game. You can take that with a grain of salt if you want, but the point is, it was a nice win over a middle-of-the-road SEC team, so something to build on there if you're a Virginia fan. Bronco Mendenhall, with another couple of good years, especially if he continues to head in the upward direction, could easily move to 2 or 3 on this list a year or 2 down the road. We'll see, but I have him coming in right now at number 6. All right, number 5 is David Cutcliffe. Who doesn't like David Cutcliffe? It's hard to say anything bad about this guy, right? What if I told you that under David Cutcliffe, Duke had made a bowl game 6 times in the last 7 years? I mean, that's just unbelievable, okay? Duke, maybe you don't remember, I don't know, but Duke was a perennial 2, 3, 4 win team forever. I mean, obviously they're a basketball school and the majority of their resources go to the basketball program. Their stadium looks like a throwback to the 1970s. But David Cutcliffe has done an excellent job with what he's had to work with at Duke. He had a quarterback drafted in the first round this past year in Daniel Jones. And everyone knows his history with quarterbacks. We don't need to get into that there, but any Duke team that's making a bowl game consistently, and 6 out of 7 years is consistent, any Duke coach that's making a bowl game 6 out of 7 years deserves to be somewhere in the 3, 4, 5 range in terms of coaching in the ACC, because it's one of the hardest schools to succeed at. You have academic restrictions. They're a basketball program. You've got 2 other ACC schools within that same state, being UNC and NC State. So hats off to David Cutcliffe with what he's done at Duke, and I have him 5th on this list. All right, coming up at number 4, and this is a hard one too. Name the coach of Wake Forest. Dave Clawson. Won 3 straight bowl games, right? Again, you just forget that. You just forget about Wake Forest. They're not so bad that you're sitting around at the end of every year going, Jesus Christ, Wake Forest is terrible. And they're not winning 10 games or playing for ACC titles so that you're paying attention to them in November and December. They're just, like I said, they're one of those teams, sort of the 3rd to the 8th best team in the ACC every single year, that just sort of floats around the 6, 7, 8 win mark. Dave Clawson does have a history of sort of taking nothing programs and improving them. Fordham, Richmond, Bowling Green, he turned all 3 of those programs around. I don't know if I would say he's turned Wake Forest around. I mean, Wake Forest actually won the ACC, 10, 11 years ago? I know that was a long time, but still, they've had some good teams prior to Dave Clawson, but he's been really consistent there. And again, if you're Wake Forest, I think I said Boston College a minute ago. Obviously, I'm talking about Wake Forest here. But again, if you're a Wake Forest fan and you're looking at your team playing in a bowl game almost every single year, how can you really be upset? So I've got him coming in at 4th in terms of coaches in the ACC for 2019. All right, and then to me, these are the clear-cut top 3. I believe arguments can be made to switch people around, maybe 4 through 10 or whatever. I think these are the 3 best coaches in the ACC, though, and I struggled on 3 and 2. I decided to go with Dino Babers at 3, although I'm really high on Dino Babers. Dino Babers, head coach, Syracuse, 10-3 last year. This guy's on the way out, ain't he? This guy's not going to be at Syracuse long, in my opinion. If he has another year this year, if he can even win 8 games this year, I think someone's going to snatch him up. Another Power 5 school. I have no idea who it might be. We have to wait a little later in the year, see where some openings are and things like that. There might be one at Florida State. But I really like Dino Babers. He beat Clemson 2 years ago. He almost beat Clemson in Clemson last year. Yes, Trevor Lawrence went down in that game and a backup that you never heard of came in. This was the first game after Kelly Bryant announced his transfer out of the program. So it was game 5 last year. Lawrence goes down in the first quarter. Clemson almost loses. But, I mean, the point is, within the ACC, Syracuse has been the only team to beat Clemson within the last 2 years. And both years, they were really, really close. They beat them in Syracuse in 17, almost beating them in Clemson in 18. And this will be one of the biggest games within the ACC this season when Clemson travels again to Syracuse to take on the Orange. But I'm real high on Dino Babers, and honestly, this guy should get out of Syracuse if he has the chance. There's no built-in recruiting advantages up there. They're not a traditionally great football team. If he gets an offer to what he would consider to be a better Power 5 head coaching spot, it wouldn't surprise me if he took it. And again, if he has a good year this year, it wouldn't surprise me if he left after this season. But I've got Dino Babers coming in at 3rd. All right, number 2, I've got Dave Duren. And speaking of coaches who may be on the way out, Dave Duren has been interviewed and sort of looked around at some other coaching positions in the offseason over the last couple of years, most notably being one of the 11 people that turned down the Tennessee job after they fired Lyle at the end of the 2017 season. But Dave Duren, NC State Wolfpack, turned down jobs to stay there. He probably should have got out. I don't know. NC State is going to win 8, 9, 10 games every single year, but that's it. They're not winning the ACC. They're not going 4-8. You never, under Dave Duren, NC State's never going to be in a position to fire him. He's never going to have a year like that. He's going to keep your head above water every single year. You just wonder at some point if he's not going to look for greener pastures. I don't know. But to me, he's the second best coach in the ACC right now. Him and Dino are close. And again, if for some reason Dino stays at Syracuse and has another good year this year and decides to stay, maybe we flip-flop them. But for now, I've got Dave Duren coming in second on the list of ACC coaches in 2019. And of course, that leaves Dabo Swinney number 1 on the list. No surprise there. Dabo Swinney's number 1 on almost every coaching list, even if you look at, the entire Power 5 or whatever. A lot of people still have Saban number 1. Some people have flip-flopped that with Dabo 1, Saban 2. But in any case, those are your top 2 coaches in college football right now, obviously. Won the national title 2 out of the last 3 years. Won the ACC, 3 years in a row. Made the playoffs, I believe, 4 years in a row. Was that right? Didn't make it. I think Florida State made it in 14, but then Clemson made it in 15, 16, 17, and 18, right? Winning it in 16 and 18. The hottest program in America. They've been doing all that with recruiting classes ranked in the teens. You look at them now, they're sitting at number 1 in the recruiting for 2020, and it looks like they're probably going to hang on to that spot for the entirety of the recruiting cycle and probably finish 2020 at number 1. So you have to ask yourself, if they've been dominating like they have with recruiting classes ranked in the teens, what's going to happen if they start recruiting consistently in the top 5? But Dabo Swinney, without question, the top coach in the ACC and one of, if not the top coaches in all of college football right now. That's the list of my ACC coaches for 2019. Feel free to disagree. I know some of you are. Like I said, I feel like the ACC is real hard to rank in the 3 to 8 territory. I think it's pretty obvious Willie Taggart is terrible. I think it's pretty obvious that Dabo Swinney is the best. I think it's pretty obvious that Dino Babers and Dave Duren are really good coaches. 3 to 9, you sort of can put those names in a box, jumble them around, dump them out, and whatever you have is whatever you have. But that's what I came up with. Let me know where I'm wrong in the comments down below. I appreciate you guys watching, and have a great morning.